I promised myself after my Far Cry 5 video, I was done talking about this series. It's been a thorn in my side for far too long, and buying into it each and every year brings me nothing but bone-crushing mediocrity. So I swore off it like a middle-aged person says they're never drinking again after a weekend bender. Alas, after only a month out from New Dawn's release, I saw it was 50% off on the Humble store, and curiosity got the better of me. And you know what they say about the curious cat? It gives too much fucking money to Ubisoft. For what essentially boils down to a near full-priced, should-have-been DLC game, there is a surprising amount to unpack in this new title. While this video will ultimately be a critique on New Dawn, the franchise has hit a critical mass of boring that needs to be addressed. So through the lens of the latest game, I'd like to offer up a solution to make whatever the next installment is, interesting. So let's not waste time getting started. It's no secret that Ubisoft have had issues maintaining their games on a yearly release schedule. After Assassin's Creed 2's release in 2008, a mainline game was released every single year up until 2015 with Syndicate. 2014's outing Unity being a point of exhaustion for fans of the series. Taking only a year off to spend extra time redeveloping what the core of the series was about worked incredibly well, with Origins receiving high praise from fans and critics alike. With last year's entry acting like a sidestep rather than a leap forward, taking another break this year might be the right call. All of this is to say, yearly releases are tricky, especially when it comes to giant, sprawling open world games that rely on so many complex mechanics, stories, and emergent gameplay to stay engaging. Hammering out a game year after year is no small task, and games suffer from it. Ubisoft's decision to release Watch Dogs and its sequel 2 years apart, it gave them time to sit back and evaluate why their new modern-day tech-centric IP didn't work. And in doing so, they fixed all their issues, creating something that was mainly an improvement despite some technical hitches. So where does this leave Far Cry? There was the standard 2 years between Primal and 5. Surely that should have meant it received a significant upgrade, right? Well, if you saw my video on the missed opportunities of Far Cry 5, you would know it's the exception to the Ubisoft rule. And what I learned with Far Cry New Dawn is that Ubisoft refuses to acknowledge that the fundamental gameplay loop of the series is uninteresting. There is some good to be found within, don't get me wrong, but when boiled down, traversal is painfully one note. Most of the time, I found myself holding down W for long lengths of time to walk from point A to B, or you can get a car and do the same thing, but faster. Even the parachute, wingsuit, or double jump can't save the monotony. They just help speed it up a bit, which is a shame because I always loved the wingsuit sections in Far Cry games. They were a fun reward for hitting certain sections of the game in 3 and 4, offering a good level to test them out on. 5 just relegated them to a perk, and the same can be said for New Dawn. But at least 5 had moments to climb high, like really high, and just go for it. It's hard to say what will make Far Cry's traversal feel good. Open world games in general have suffered a lot in this department. The race for the biggest, most sprawling map has left a lot of things in the dust, like movement. Breath of the Wild solved this issue by designing a map that was meant to be traversed. That might sound like a weird statement to make about a video game. Of course, you're supposed to travel across it, but every nook and cranny of New Hyrule lends itself to exploring further. Oh, you want to climb up high and see an overview of your surrounding area? Cool, you can. You can slowly glide down, or get there quickly with a shield surf. This game was made to be played without a heads-up display, and it shows in the level design. It's built for traversal first and combat second. By contrast, Hope County is very difficult to get an aerial view of unless you get into a flying vehicle, but then that presents the earlier issues of discounting what it feels like to explore, instead just skipping over everything. While you're running on foot, you will have a very limited view. Rarely are there places to perch up high. These vantage points are generally for outpost scouting. Even driving lets you press a button to automatically get where you want to go. The emphasis in the world is combat first, traversal second. While the option to play HUDless is available to you, it's not ideal since you'll be stopping to check your map consistently to see where you need to be going, instead of just taking in a look at your surroundings to get an idea of how to progress forward. This is a consistent theme within Far Cry's open world design philosophy. 2 had the perfect solution of having a diegetic map, and I wish we could go back to that system one day. Other games have begun to adopt it, so why not bring it back here? Despite being made combat first, I found myself avoiding it outside of missions or outposts as much as I possibly could, due to how uninteresting gunplay actually is. Which is a harsh statement, but I'll explain what I mean, just bear with me. Firefights generally play out in two different ways, stealthily or all guns blazing. Depending on your playstyle, you will probably carry guns that reflect your personal style, and maybe switch it up when the feeling is right. The problem with gunplay is there is no weight or satisfaction in shooting enemies. Little things like force feedback, good sound and visual design that makes sense, and of course tight hitboxes all help accumulate into a solid shooting experience that can really elevate the monotony of constant firefights throughout a game. There were moments within New Dawn where I was shooting enemies point blank and nothing was connecting. Meanwhile, I would make wild shots with the new buzzsaw launcher weapon and it would randomly hit at a wide berth, while going on to ricochet off and kill even more. Seeing as this is one of the highest damage weapons in the game, those kills always felt unearned. And since it was the optimal strategy, and seeing as every enemy drops an entire cache's worth of ammunition, I never felt in danger of running low, free to continue literally mowing everyone down as I saw fit. The ebb and flow of guns and abilities is incredibly rigid. If you look at something like Destiny 2, using powers in conjunctions with your guns is satisfying. Even the jump arcs are perfected to work with combat, instead of against it. The powers you acquire in New Dawn are half-baked, and work out to be what is essentially a replacement for craftable syringes, but severely less so. There is now a resource meter known as Eden's Gift. There are two abilities that use the new resource meter, the Stealthily Ghost and Hitting Like a Truck Wrath. While it replenishes naturally over time, you can also grab Eden's Touch, which brings your meter back with takedowns, and Eden's Gift, which ups the regeneration rate. Oh, and there's a double jump, but that's free from cost. These perks themselves alone aren't a bad idea, but like a lot of things in New Dawn's wheelhouse, it feels at odds with combat. You are either a regular person using bolted together weapons, or a superhuman who can take out bosses in a couple hits. There really isn't enough depth within to justify an entire resource meter. Even the double jump isn't conducive with firefights. It's more of an escape or climbing tool, rather than something to use while fighting. With a linearly structured game, it's easy to set the pace and flow of combat by tailoring enemy placements to the world design, leaving as much or as little room to breathe as developers want. Pregnant pauses between encounters can help build tension and raise suspense levels as desired, or there can be no time to take a breath, berating players as designers see fit. All of that is up to the team to play to the strength of their game. So when procedural systems are introduced, it's a tightrope walk trying to flesh out a world, with just enough to keep things interesting while not overwhelming players with a sense of dread of something always being around the corner when you just want to explore. Downtime is just important as uptime, but the quiet moments need to be earned and feel worth your time. Using Breath of the Wild again, if you're not actively in combat, you're collecting items to upgrade Link or figuring out where to go next by exploring the environment. Downtime in Far Cry games can be summed up as pressing forward and following the dot on your screen to the next destination. Normally, to compensate for this, interesting scenery or events are put in place for players to gawk at as they skip along between points. So for example in Far Cry 4, even though you move about in almost the same way, there are some absolutely breathtaking backdrops to look at. Montana's post-apocalyptic rebrand is technically good looking. The team brought a high level of fidelity to everything, which was nice, but it lacks personality. Kyrat worked in conjunction with its high elevation, giving long draw distances to gawk at, and with this incredibly obnoxious bright pink littered everywhere, a lot of things that could be fun turn into an eyesore. Doing something isn't always the end goal with downtime. I'm a firm believer in giving games room to breathe between objectives, but when that space is devoid of anything interesting, it's hard to see it as anything more than wasted time. Since the world design works against players, it's not fun finding your path, because if you don't let the game do it for you, you're stuck wandering around trying to make sense of it all. Maybe you'll kill an animal or pick up a herb along the way to your next encounter, but they're not essential rewards that are exclusive to your goal. They can be found in various other places as well as in the wild, so it's not an exciting find, just something there to grab because why not? So downtime isn't earned within Far Cry, which leads to another problem with movement in New Dawn. There isn't a whole lot to find, apart from ethanol you need to upgrade prosperity. The idea of collecting a resource to upgrade your home base is an interesting one, but it's not a fleshed out enough concept to really feel satisfying, or like it's done on your own terms. Instead, it's used as a progression check to move forward with the story. Before going further, I should probably give some context. So New Dawn setup is this. 20 years after that seemingly out of nowhere nuclear blast at the end of Far Cry 5, which apparently is teasing radio broadcast that I missed, the survivors attempt to rebuild Hope County, starting with a quaint little town called Prosperity, all while fighting off a nationwide roving group of bandits called the Highwaymen. So you must travel across this slightly deteriorated version of the last game's map, finding supplies to build weapons, and ethanol to upgrade prosperity. Each aspect of prosperity requires a varied amount of ethanol to upgrade, and each can be upgraded a total of 3 times, so it's up to you to decide what gets the treatment. However, if you don't upgrade the weapons bench, you will be at a severe disadvantage for the remainder of your time in Hope County. Collecting ethanol also works counter to other aspects of the game. It felt like if I wasn't either doing story missions or collecting this valuable resource, I was wasting time. Since it's such an important thing to the game's advancement, it felt weird that it's not rewarded for everything you do, even if it was just a little bit. As it stands, there's only 3 ways to collect the stuff outside of early story missions, and that is liberating outposts, hijacking trucks full of the stuff, or random supply drops that feel like they were supposed to play out like they do in Battle Royale games with highwaymen descending down on packages at the same time as you, but the threat is so minimal that it's a trivial exercise. In the end, rebuilding prosperity is like the part of Fallout 4 where you build towns, but stripped of almost any player agency, so it's somehow even worse. Upgrading a mandatory amount of aspects within prosperity means at some point you will have to do a combination of all 3 of those previous tasks. But honestly, it's easiest just to grind outposts, because as I always say in these videos, they are by far the best parts of Farcry games. And well, here they got a fairly decent upgrade, which is one of the shining beacons of hope in New Dawn. I won't go into why I love outposts here since I've done that in 2 other videos already, but instead just get straight into why I like the updated version. So now, like I said, they offer up the core resource ethanol upon completion, and a small amount the first time you liberate an outpost. Doing so gives you a new place to set up a gun workshop, garage, and place to fast travel to. But you can abandon it, letting the highwaymen reclaim it for an added amount of resources, raising its level and the amount of resources given each time you do this. It's a fun way to make each attempt at liberating an outpost a bit different and more hectic on repeat tries at different difficulties. On top of that, managing to pull off a liberation without being noticed or raising any alarms will give a bonus boost to ethanol. What sucks about this is if you do a perfect run of no alarms and without getting caught, it's the same bonus price in oil. Getting caught and not setting off alarms are 2 significantly different challenges. Since you can do your best to disable all alarms, but when it comes down to taking everyone out, it's an entirely separate set of challenges that I wish was differentiated in the game. The downside to all those varying levels of outposts is that since weapons work all on this grey, blue, purple, yellow scaling level system like most MMOs or loot shooters, so by the time you've made even a slight bit of progress with your prosperity rebuilds, the base level outposts are a complete breeze, and if it wasn't for the necessary ethanol collecting, would be worth skipping for how mundane they are. When I hit max level gun workshop, rolling around with elite yellow weapons, it was comical how little effort was required, which granted of course a level 4 gun versus level 1 grunts is going to be a walk in the park. But it'd be nice if they took the Bethesda approach and leveled the world with you. This is one of the few contexts where that mechanic would make sense. And once prosperity had been fully upgraded, which happens about 2/3 through the very short mainline story, there's little reason to continue liberation unless you want to do it for the satisfaction. But you'll be grinding low-level highwaymen to get to the good stuff. Outside of the upgrades to outposts, there is one flickering light in the darkness of New Dawn's mediocrity, and that is expeditions. Expeditions are kind of like outposts, in that you must infiltrate an enemy base, but instead of killing everyone, you have to extract a package, then take it to a safe area and wait to be helicoptered out. Expeditions take place all across America, so it's a good excuse to have a varied array of set pieces that aren't limited to a decrepit Montana. These parts are great. You duck and weave your way through different locations, and as you complete them, you are rewarded with components to make more weapons. Why this mode doesn't reward ethanol is beyond me, however. It seems like a good way to get players into expeditions, which are obviously meant for co-op play mode, since, like I said, not collecting ethanol feels like wasted time. My only other complaint with these new settings, outside of the resource thing, is the lack of variety and mission structure. They all play out the same way. Get dropped in via helicopter, follow a very obvious pink flare to the package, escape, then wait for an entire army to come bearing down on you. If there were different stipulations like don't get caught or no stealth weapons, even that would make things interesting enough to justify repeat playthroughs. But anything outside of grab package and run away would go a long way to keeping this game mode alive with friends. That's the recurring theme here though, is the lack of polish in every single aspect, which can be attributed to that yearly push to get the game out. I don't think anyone would have cared too much if Ubisoft took a year off to develop New Dawn further. Although gamers get pissy at almost anything, so who's to actually say? Even down to the simplest things like killing innocents is half-baked. If you do it, you're met with a giant warning not to do that. And if you keep doing it, you just die. It's not the most exciting or well thought out consequence. Giving players agency of their rebuilding of prosperity could have led to people leaving the hometown if you kept killing innocents, fleshing out the entire thing with some minor tweaks. Let me control the pace of the rebuild, and if I am too destructive, restrict what I can do. Maybe key members like the cartographer or doctor leave, and you are stuck without certain upgrades. Even the villains, arguably the main selling point of any Far Cry game since Vast was introduced in 3, in one of my favorite game trailers to date, have gone downhill since then. Pagan Min is debatable if he's on the same level as Vast or not. Far Cry Primal's antagonist Ul and Joseph Seed from 5 are so absent from their game plots that you forget they exist at times, despite the overarching narrative drive being to take them down. Joseph Seed more so since 5 marked Ubisoft wanting to branch out and create multiple villains to one story, hence the entire Seed family, John, Jacob and Faith. But it left Joseph severely underdeveloped, so by the time you hit the final chapter, it was devoid of any impact. Well, somehow New Dawn manages to do this, but worse. The twins, Mickey and Lou, whose names I had to Google to add to the script, turn up at the very start blasting diamond wood and doing burnouts on motorbikes. Basically anything more fun than what players get to do. Actually, really quick, it's kind of weird to me that bad guys are always blasting dope music like Diamond Wood, Princess Nokia and Run the Jewels at their outposts, but as soon as you liberate them, they're playing boring stuff like the Monkeys. I don't know if it's supposed to be some commentary or they associate good people with being super boring and white. Anyway, Mickey and Lou turn up maybe 3 times before their final showdown. And even then, they aren't the final boss. Remember in Far Cry 3 when Vast dies, and it turns out he's a lackey to someone bigger and badder? This is the same, but instead of some conspiracy plot, it's just Joseph Seed's son being a dick and turning into a mythological creature because he ate an apple. As soon as you meet Ethan Seed, it's incredibly obvious that this Kylo Ren light dude is going to flip out and be the real bad guy all along. But the Seeds and the twins' stories are so poorly strung together that any and all tension isn't even deflated because there was nothing to pump up those ties to begin with. So it's just an incredibly flat resolution to the story. Another example of this is when Nick Rye, a fairly prominent character from 5, returns after you rescue him. There is this big heartfelt family reunion, except that his wife and daughter, both of whom are the main good guys of New Dawn, don't mention him at all. So it's just like, how much did you guys miss him really? I get that since he can be rescued at any point of your progression in the story, it's hard to set this up. But there's all these weird little intermissions where they play different main characters' backstories in an attempt to flesh them out, I guess. Either way, that is about the extent of Nick's connection to his family. Okay, so that's enough complaining. Let's get to the fun part, fixing Far Cry. The open world philosophy just isn't working for the series anymore. Ever since 3, they've basically been copy-pasting the same formula on top of each other, and adding little pieces while simultaneously cutting corners to streamline the gameplay loop. So why not go all out and return all the way back to 2004, with linearly structured level design with more open-ended approaches? Metro Exodus did this recently, and I personally loved it for that boldness. There are main objectives that you must go to, but anything you do in the vast space between are little sections that help you out with resources or weapon upgrades. Unlike New Dawn, these upgrades have a tangible, rewarding feeling as you constantly need to be cleaning your weapons, fixing your gas mask, and even equipping add-ons to your weapons such as scopes, sights, and stocks, giving everything that extra little bit of purpose. It gives tight linear design in the greater context of an open world design philosophy. No area is so large that it feels overwhelming, nor does it relegate things to corridor shooting. Outposts can even remain in this context, and it also gives room for expeditions to stay around. Skill trees need to go. Watch my video on experience systems because all these ideas can be applied here. But the TLDR is, progression and fun powers shouldn't be gated by arbitrary points, especially if those points can be purchased by gross microtransactions that seem like they invented more perks to gut the core gameplay to sell more in-game currency. Instead, interesting story beats or the player's own skills should help things move along. A villain like Vast is a must. They don't have to be the same type of psychotic, but someone who is constantly in your face, actively trying to stop your progress and an actual threat, not one who turns up once and is quickly forgotten. Tighten up the shooting and have more accurate hitboxes. Let guns feel like they have actual weight behind them, and bring back customization to weapons. In fact, this was missing from New Dawn, a post-apocalyptic setting where everything is held together in creative ways is almost criminal. And finally, find a way to make traversal interesting. With shorter, more contained open levels, this is a much easier task. Remember earlier in this video when I said linear games can control their own pace a lot easier? That can help travel time feel a lot less like a waste within the currently vast open worlds of Far Cry, where it gets incredibly tedious fast. One other issue I have with Far Cry in general is its overuse of gunfights. I know that sounds weird to say about a shooter, but since its core gunplay is lacking, it feels weak to always use it for every single mission no matter what is happening. Some of the best shooters have puzzles to change things up here and there. And when this happens in New Dawn, if you spend 20 seconds before you get the right answer, the game just flat out tells you what to do. I know the puzzles aren't a key focus or even that hard, but some more of these without telling players how to solve them immediately would break up the pacing from constant samey shootouts. Just a few more puzzles and a little less focus on constantly killing things in every mission would give players time to breathe and more appreciation for the high octane moments. Oh, and add more side quests again. 8 is an absolute joke for an open world game, seeing as 6 of those are getting more guns for hire. And the other 2 are doing that weird Zelda photo memory thing sans the story and emotional weight, and collecting songs to listen to in your car. Honestly, how they thought having so few side quests was a good thing for such a huge open world is beyond me, and shows the damage of yearly releasing. Overall, there is so much hidden potential buried deep within this franchise that has become muddied by samey mechanics and a desire to become what it once was. Stifled by a strange, almost yearly release schedule that doesn't give the team the time they need to really see each concept reach their true potential. There are good elements in each entry of the franchise since 3. It just needs to step away from redundantly huge maps that don't bring anything to the gameplay loop aside from monotony. Give a tighter focus to what makes the games fun. Liberating outposts and wacky villains we actually feel compelled to get to know before we kill. I just hope whatever Far Cry 6 brings, it's more than whatever New Dawn tried to be.
I'm fucking drunk on my mind, I've had a hell of a time. Will someone give me a ride? Hey, tomorrow needs to remind me, wish that we could rewind. Don't wanna forget this night. I'm twisted, I'm tripping, I'm drunk on my mind.